Hey, good morning, everybody. We're going to give it a few minutes to let other folks join in or get into the Zoom. We'll get started here in a couple minutes. Hey, good morning, all. We're going to let some folks join. We'll probably get started here in the next 2 or 3 minutes. Thank you. Good morning, all. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us for this webinar. We're going to work through some best practices for maintaining your synthetic turf fields and running tracks. We'll start with some introductions. My name is Alan Wolf. I'm a field consultant with the Motz Group. I've been at Motz for going on 12 years now. Really got my start in the industry on the natural grass side, maintaining natural grass at golf courses, and spent 9 seasons on the Cincinnati Reds grounds crew. In 2013, I joined Motz Group as a field installation technician and was a superintendent with Motz for about 6 years. Upon my completion as a role as superintendent, I joined our maintenance and warranty division, which you're going to hear a lot about today, and which Keith and Nick are spearhead that department for us. Spent 3 years on the maintenance and warranty side of the house, and 2 years ago I joined our business development team, and now I am our field consultant and lead our business development efforts here in the Carolinas. Nick and Keith, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Nick Maynard, Director of Services. I have about 12, 13 years experience maintaining synthetic surfaces on the track and field side. Had my own business for about 10 years, partnered with the Motz several years ago, and I lead our service group, which is any warranty repairs on the synthetic turf side, running track side, and any small projects. Keith?
And good morning, everyone. Just like Alan, started my career with Motz on the install side of things. I've been with us now for 20 years and was fortunate enough as we started developing the maintenance service part of our company. Been involved with that since started that in about 2007. So everything that we talk about here is what we've learned over those years on how to maintain these fields. So that's what we'll be talking about.
So thanks, Nick and Keith. A little bit more about Motz and who we are. We've been in business under the same leadership for 45 years. In 2018, we became an employee-owned company. We have about 125 employee owners. We have 750 fields in the ground worldwide. What we're going to talk about today, the maintenance side of the house, of the business. We've completed over 4,000 maintenance visits since the inception of this maintenance program in the early 2000s. More recently, we became licensed contractors in North and South Carolina. Here's a quick snapshot of what we offer to the market from the athletic field installation side, excuse me. We do offer synthetic turf installs as well as natural grass installs. What we're going to talk about today are actually the next two bullets you see on the screen there, the field maintenance on synthetic specific fields, and then track maintenance. We do have our own in-house project management and install crews. Then from a product side, we do develop and sell infills to the market, as well as a different type of synthetic turf in a mini pitch. This is a quick snapshot of our maintenance map. This is a map of all the fields that we service within this region or these regions. And these are all not all Motz field owners, but are all fields that we have done maintenance on. Most recently, from a field installation side, we completed the synthetic soccer sideline at Wake Forest University. That was back in June. And then more recently, we replaced the existing surface at Stuart Kramer High School. You can see there on the left. A little snapshot of the agenda for today. Keith's going to go over critical grooming practices. Nick will cover our annual deep cleans, field assessments, performance testing, ways that you can spot signs of an aging field, and we'll hit on track maintenance. We do have time for Q&A at the end. If you'll notice on the bottom of your screen, there's a chat and there's also a Q&A box. If you're going to submit a question via the Zoom instead of asking it at the end, please use the Q&A box. And with that, I'll kick it over to Keith.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. So Motz offers a 24-hour repair response on our installed fields. And currently we maintain over 500 fields maintenance-wise a year. So we are seeing these fields repeatedly, yearly actually, and being able to evaluate those and make suggestions to get the best life or the longest life out of these fields. And like Alan said earlier, we currently cover 9 states around the territory. What we're going to cover today are 6 critical grooming practices. These are just the highlights of what we're looking for, why we do the grooming. So if we think the first one is time of day, we want to be on that field early in the morning. We don't want to be out there when the sun is high in the sky. That heat allows things to move a little easier. So if we can be out there early morning or late afternoon, is really helpful, keeping that field tight, not moving those lines around. Number 2, turning radius. So we're thinking about an 11-yard turn, which is easy to gauge on a football field, a little more difficult when you don't have those hash marks to check yourself with. Again, the reason we do that 11-yard turn is that keeps the turn radius at a pretty good arc and keeps that machinery from pushing wrinkles into our field. The direction of travel, we always want to go sideline to sideline, but we want to identify that seaming plan from each install application. So it's easy, football and soccer, running sideline to sideline, you see those panels. But baseball or softball, those fields can lay out from home to first, home to second, or home to third. So it's identifying that layout plan and following those seams. The fourth is speed. So we want to stay slow on these fields. We're looking at about 3 miles an hour, which is painfully slow, but we're not looking to be so fast that we're adding friction and heat into that field as well. So keeping an eye on that. You can download a speed app on your phone if your piece of equipment doesn't have a speedometer in it, which is really critical to keep that speed down. The fifth is depth of groomer. So when we bring the groomer out, we lower it down on the field. We're just looking to have those bristles tickle the fibers. You're not trying to dig that bristle in and move infill around. It's going to move a little bit of infill, but that's not the key component or why we're using that groomer. We're using that to get those fibers to stand back up and to even out the wear on it. We want that fiber standing up as long as we can through the life of the field. And then number 6 is the time of the week. So this isn't a game day activity. Keeping your field clean prior to game day is really good, but the grooming needs to happen earlier in the week. If something catastrophic happens, if we pull a hash mark out or pull a line up, that gives the company time to respond to that and get that glued in before your big game day. So if we look here, these are some of the driving patterns. We just have that soccer and football field on there. That's kind of representative of the pattern that we're going to follow, but it's best to identify those seaming plans off of from your provider. Like we spoke earlier, using your grooming brush sideline to sideline, not end zone to end zone, really key. We don't want to cross those seams and move those 5-yard lines out. Once we start this pattern, if we start on the back of the end zone, we would carry that pattern all the way through across the field to the other end zone. And then alternating between clockwise and counterclockwise on these turns really helps to change up that pattern. So that changes up the lay of the fiber itself. So if we look here, this is a sped up time-lapse video. So we're just moving down the field in these patterns. You know, this looks a little visually quicker than that 3 mile an hour we spoke about earlier. But moving down the field in 6-foot intervals, we'll keep that circle going pattern all the way across that field. So kind of rounding all of this up, timing is key on these fields. Being sure to groom early in the morning or later in the afternoon. Avoid that sun at the highest point if possible. Just keeps a lot of things from happening. So like I said, adding that friction into there is hard on inlays and glue. Also, earlier in the morning helps prevent static buildup. So if we have a little bit of moisture in that field from dew, it will help that field relax a little bit more. And then tracking on grooming every 40 hours of play. So at the Motz Group, we recommend every 40 hours, which is equivalent to about every 2 weeks. If you get more or less play on that, you can adjust that grooming as well. But the reason we're that 40 hours, we're just not trying to over groom these fields and wear them out with a piece of machinery. We would rather the kids play them out. So if we look at the two issues we have here, over grooming or under grooming. So like I spoke earlier, just over grooming is, you know, this isn't a weekly activity. If we base the amount of play on 40 hours, it's being pretty truthful with that 40 hours. Organized practices, recesses, gym class. If you think of a gym class being maybe 45 minutes long, they might not be out on the field for 15 minutes as they change, come out onto the field, maybe play for 20 minutes, and then go back and change. So we're really tracking on 20 minutes of play out there. A football practice, if they say they have the field from 5 to 8, are they out there on the field for that whole 3 hours? A lot of times we see them come out, they can stretch or what have you. Maybe they'll stretch for a half hour, go back in and lift weights for an hour, and come back out and do a walkthrough. So now we're only looking at them being out there really for an hour and a half. Under grooming, if we look in that bottom right-hand picture, using that groomer is going to move some of the infill back in the highway areas, but that's, again, not the purpose of it. We are just tickling the tops of those fibers to get them to stand back up. Being aware of this second base slide pit, making sure that we're topping infill off in there or bringing that infill, pushing that infill back into where it needs to be is really critical to get the longevity out of these fields. So checking your infill levels, on the picture on the right here, we have a infill depth gauge, which you can get, but you really don't need it. And I'll show you here on the next slide on how we check it. But the most common highway areas is penalty spot with the plant foot. We have a lot more right-footed kickers than left. So if you think of the plant foot being on the left side of that penalty spot, and the sweep through the spot, big area that we want to check. Soccer corner kicks as well, soccer goal mouth, soccer goal kick. We just see a lot of that infill displaced in those areas. The lacrosse crease, if you think of that 6-foot crease and that goalie is just moving back and forth, can move infill out of those areas. Talked about baseball and softball, the pitching mounds and the softball pitching circle, where the softball pitcher drags that back foot, can really displace that infill. We want to replace that sometimes daily to keep that wear from happening. Batter's boxes, catcher's box, right-handed batter's box, you think of that batter digging in that back foot. Second base slide pit, we just seen in the previous picture. That second base slide pit is visual right there. So bringing that infill, moving that infill, whether it's with a broom, power broom, what have you, can move that infill back into that slide pit. Add if you need to, but we need to keep that infill in there to keep those fibers protected. So here we're showing, if you look, there's not much fiber coming up between my fingers. And when we move right here, you can start seeing that low infill area. So there's more fiber coming up between my fingers, up here in the white as well. So here we can see that dark spot. A lot of times you're going to see a visual before you get your hands into the turf. You're walking up to the penalty spot area. You can just see that dark difference. So here, just adding whatever infill that your field has. If you need help identifying or need extra infill, please reach out to us and we can get that figured out and ordered if need be. So just replaying that just for a visual, kind of no fiber coming up between my fingers. Where the infill is low, you can start seeing that fiber up above the tops of my fingers. And it gets a little taller the farther into that penalty spot we get. That dark visual between the light green and the dark green, you can tell an activity is happening there. And then doubling up on the infill. So add it as necessary. It might be weekly, like a softball pitcher, that might be daily. Lacrosse creases, the same thing. You might have to add that. You can do it this way, or kind of chicken feed that into that larger area. So field recommendations, we try to limit chewing gum on these fields. Food and seeds, so we think of sunflower seeds, just can't get the shell out of that field without removing a lot of infill. So eliminating those if you can. Baseball brings a lot of those seeds in, so we want to limit their access to those. Drinking sodas or red Gatorades, we want to limit those as well. Those are capable of staining the whites on these fields. So if those come out orange or clear is fine. Any of the Gatorades that you dump out there can attract the bees. So we try to limit what is dumped on these fields, try to dump those outside of the tracks. Metal spikes, sharp objects. So we think of metal spikes usually on your baseball fields. We want to limit that. It just shreds the fibers quickly. Outdoor training and classrooms, weight rooms. Want to keep the weights off of these fields. Medicine balls, kettlebells, anything like that. Is just not good. It's not going to damage the turf. It's going to damage the base under that turf. Same with events, staging, anything like that. So homecomings, anything like that. If you're putting a stage out there on the field, we want to make sure that we protect the feet of that stage in that low or that high center of impact on that. Make sure that we protect it with either plastic decking that's designed for these fields, or you can use a 3/4 inch plywood. Just making sure that we remove that as quickly as possible after the event. If you put chairs out, make sure that the feet are protected with some sort of protection cushion on that foot. If the chairs are steel, if they sit out overnight, they're capable of rusting your white lines, and you'll see that on there as well. So making sure to remove those as quickly as possible. No vehicles need to be driven on these fields. It's, again, not necessarily going to damage the turf, but it will damage the base. It can crush drainage tiles or what have you that you'd have to replace. And with that, I will pass it over to Nick Maynard.
Thanks, Keith. Keith mentioned what you can do for your field on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. I'm here to talk about what we can do on the annual for your field. So we perform a little over 500 condition services a year within our service group. So that condition service entails a multi-step process. So picture in the middle here shows one of our pieces of equipment. So the front of the machine has a spring tine rake, and what that rake does, it decompacts your field. So over the life of your field, it'll become a little harder year in, year out. And so what we do is we decompact that field by introducing this rake to your surface. The next step through that process is we run a magnet over your field. You see the picture on the right, we do extract some metal. So that magnet will extract any ferrous metal out of your field. Next step would be to vacuum and broom your field. So inside that machine, there's a couple series of sieves that they'll introduce the top layer of the infill that will hop up on the sieve there and shake out any foreign debris. So collecting any dirt, dust, or hair in that machine, and then the last step to that cleaning process is grooming. So we'll move in a similar fashion that Keith described on the video earlier on how to groom. While we're cleaning the field, our techs will also walk the field, check any of those high wear areas, check any seams, topping off those high wear areas with any infill of your field. We will then disinfect the field. So we'll spray the entire field with a contact disinfectant. And then the last step to that process is our GMAX testing. So if you're unfamiliar with GMAX testing, this is a shock attenuation test. We do 3 drops per location. There's 10 locations across your field that we will then develop an average. So some reasons for this GMAX test, it just shows the level of safety for your field. So we understand that these fields get harder year over year. And then if your field gets up to 200, that's unsafe to play on. So that's the critical number that you want to stay away from. We'll see when we drop this device, it'll also help us with our maintenance recommendations. So if your field is too soft, we can do some things. If your field is too hard, we can do some other things. So it really drives some recommendations back to you. And then this also yields in replacement planning. So we know that your field will get harder and harder, and eventually it'll be unsafe to play on. So we'll help drive those replacement planning efforts with your staff. And the last step to this is we produce a report. This report shows the multi-step process that we do, checking those seams, checking those logos, checking their hash marks, also describing the type of debris that we took out, how many trash bags were taken off your surface, any metal that was collected will be identified on there. The second page on the right there is the overall layout of your field and those locations that we dropped that GMAX on. And then the last page on that report would be historical value. So this is something we will document and present to you every year, showing how your field is progressing. So Keith mentioned some things that you need to do on the infill side, but there's also some signs of aging of your field. So loose or torn inseams. So sometimes fields are constructed in different ways. You could have a glued seam. You could have a product called hot melt. You can also have a stitch seam. These are some of older technologies out there, but those tend to fail as your field gets a little older. So those seams or inlays will come up. That's a good indication that your field is aging. Your infill levels will reduce just over time with play in those particular areas. When that infill migrates out of these areas, it will significantly break down those fibers. If there's no rubber or infill in those areas and there's no fiber, that will result in higher GMAX scores. So those are some signs of aging in the field, and here's some solutions of aging field. So Keith mentioned adding those infills back in those high wear areas. We also go through and repair any of those torn or inlay seams. We also will replace and do any patchwork on these high wear areas. So the picture on here on the right is a lacrosse crease. This is one of the areas that always tends to fail without proper maintenance. So what we would do is come through, cut out these larger areas, replacing with a new piece of turf, cutting in any lines, logos, or hash marks in that area, and then replacing any infill that's specific to your current surface. That was kind of everything on the turf maintenance side that we'd like to discuss. On the next side of the house, we understand that your turf is a very large investment. We understand that you've got another large investment right outside of your synthetic field. On the track maintenance side of the house, we produce a couple different service offerings. We do have a light cleaning, a deep cleaning that we'll talk about in detail here. And then we also do in-house repairs as well. So it's a great alternate to replacing or overlaying your current surface. We can just come through, do some cleaning, do some repairs, and get your surface back up and running. So some reasons why customers clean their track. So over time, the rubber granules of your track surface, whether it's a latex surface or a polyurethane surface or a sheet good rolled out product, we can clean. These surfaces will come and silt in over time, and then becoming slippery over the life of your surface. So number one is safety. We want to make sure that these surfaces are playable and runnable. And then second would be performance. So we can do some testing of pre and post, which is a friction test over the surface. And we actually can increase that friction, resulting in a faster surface after cleaning. Then also, after some rain events or some poor drainage, we can clean those surfaces as well. So it's a great alternate in lieu of like a structural spray or an overlay. We can improve the line appearance. So on the next picture here, kind of shows a little bit of our process, a little before picture of a surface that we cleaned a couple years ago. We don't use any solvents or detergents. We just use high pressure heated water that we extract that dirty water with a high capacity vacuum blower that then goes back to our trailer, filters out any sediment, and then discharges that dirty water away from the surface. So you can see here in lane 7 that the water will then always tend to shed away from lane 7 or 8 towards the field or towards lane 1. You'll start to see in lane 1 and 2 here that the water will move across the surface, hitting the grass there on the left side. There is no drain on this track, so it doesn't drain appropriately. So it'll tend to silt in lane 1 and 2, covering the markings. You can barely see the numbers there, 1 and 2, and then that dirty area throughout the chute area. So what we'll do is we'll use about 1600 psi with about 16.5 gallons a minute, washing and scrubbing this surface, and the results are dramatic. On the after picture here, shows the dramatic improvement of just cleaning. So this picture, we did not touch the lines, we did not touch the picture, and we can actually increase the line appearance in lieu of repainting or relaying out this current surface. So track cleaning is relatively new to the market, but it's a big thing that our customers like to move forward with to get back their surface in a runnable condition. So, but kick it back over to Alan here.
Thanks, Nick and Keith. Earlier this year, the city of Mebane reached out to us and had some unique needs on their 2 fields at Mebane Park. You can see the 2 fields in the center of the screen there. Their needs kind of pretty much encompassed, everything that Keith and Nick just talked through, minus track cleaning, obviously, because they don't have a track around their surface. And so what we provided to them was, an all-encompassing turnkey solution to replace and patch some of their highway areas. They don't play lacrosse here yet, but most of their penalty kick spots, we replaced and patched those areas out. In addition, we added infill, large volume of infill back into both of these surfaces. And then once we completed the patchwork, all the repairs, and adding infill into these systems, we performed this annual maintenance service for them upon completion of all that. And this is a quote from the parks director from the city of Mebane, just about his experience in working with us throughout that process. So we got some time for some Q&A. In addition, prior to getting to Q&A, we are hosting a synthetic turf maintenance showcase at Stuart Cramer High School on their brand new surface on Thursday, November 14th from 10 to 2. Hopefully you are able to join us. If you need any additional information, didn't have time to scan the QR code there, feel free to reach out to any of us. Our contact info is on the bottom left of the screen. We'll go ahead and get started with some Q&A. Keith, I'll start with you. What's the most common repair you see?
We see, if you think of the sheer volume of hash marks we have on field, so most of, a lot of times it's corner of hash marks, corners of your inlays. So whether it's a number, end zone letters, what have you.
Thank you. Nick, how long after the track or field cleaning can my athletes or students use the surfaces for practice or competition?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. So I'll mention on that synthetic turf cleaning, the last step that we do is we disinfect the field. So once that spray is dried, it's playable. Typically in the summer that dries rather quickly, but I would say about 30 minutes after we're done with our service, you can get back and play on that field. On the track side, it's a little different. We use a lot of water. We have hoses and things that potentially could slip on or trip on. But once that surface is dried, typically on the track side, it would take about a couple hours once we are done that you can run back on that surface.
Thank you. Keith, another one for you. What's the best way to remove leaves or debris from the field without disrupting infill?
So using a lawn sweeper, you can use a lawn sweeper. We just got to watch how much infill we're pulling up with that as well. You can use some of the pull behind blowers, move that debris off to a surrounding area, whether it's a sideline, kind of condense it all there, and then use the lawn sweeper through that area or on the track as well.
Thank you. I'll take this one. If my maintenance team performs a repair, will it void my warranty? You'll definitely want to check with your turf provider's warranty first, and that goes for, even our service. You heard earlier that we perform service on over 500 of these fields annually. Not all of those fields that we service are Motz Group fields, but you'll definitely want to check with your specific warranty that your turf provider gave you with the purchase of the field. Keith or Nick, either one, how long does the grooming service take? And then on the back end, for you, Nick, how long does the track deep clean take?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer both of these. For the grooming process, that's a several hour process. A full condition service that I went over in detail, that's probably depending on the age of your field, amount of repairs, that's typically about a 4 to 6 hour process, just specific to the synthetic turf side. On the track cleaning side, that deep cleaning that we went over today, that typically, depending on events, D areas, if you've got 2 D areas or just one, typically that's about a 5-day process.
Thank you. Another one for you, Nick. Does track cleaning improve the performance of the track?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Yes, it does. So we have the ability to test the surface pre and post cleaning. So that's a skid resistant test. So there's an industry standard that's an allowable skid resistant unit. So what this device is, it's a rubber boot that swings from a drop height that skids across the surface, and it results a value. And so we can test pre and post, and then the results are pretty dramatic. So yeah, we can increase the friction after the cleaning, and that's confirmed with the test results.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll take this one. Does the maintenance service extend the life of my field? Yeah, what we have seen and the data points that we've taken is the more services that our customers take advantage of. So our customers we've performed service, on their surface 10 times or more, they're getting an additional year of life out of that field, and that directly correlates to the amount of services down, right? So they're performing the service over 10 times, they're getting around 11 and a half, 12 years out of their field, and then on down from there. Last question. Keith, if I have 100 football players, but our gym class is only 10 kids, if they're both on the turf for an hour, does it count as the same amount of play?
If they're using the whole field, yes. So whether the 100 football players, if they're using the whole field and 10 kids are using the whole field, it really is the same amount of time. So if you think of grooming, like we said, we want to account for 40 hours. If those 10 kids are scattered across the field, those flat-soled shoes are adding a little more wear than a cleat, where a cleat brings that fiber back up behind the step. But one point we want to make is that we want the kids to play it out versus us using the groomer to groom it out, wearing that field out with a piece of machinery. So tracking on that is really critical. But yes, say a 10 kid gym class or recess, what have you, as long as they're scattered across the field. If they're only using half the field, you might only track some maintenance on that one side. So
we got one more in here. I'll take this. Have you found a difference in the different infill products as it relates to heat retention and also hardness? Yeah, I mean, there are infills on the market that do offer heat reduction. What I like to say, or what I like to tell people, is it's just less hot. Also, any alternate infill outside of sand rubber requires a shock pad to be installed underneath the surface. With the shock pad, that's providing your shock attenuation and not the rubber system. I'd be glad to dive further deep into that. So again, appreciate everybody's time for joining today. If there's anything that we didn't cover, that you maybe didn't get asked or we didn't go over, and you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to Nick, Keith, or myself. Our contact info is on the bottom left of the screen. I'm looking forward to hearing from some of you. Thank you.